Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. It was a typical warm summer night, and my friends and I decided to go on a spontaneous road trip to break the monotony of our small town lives. It was around 11 p.m. when we hit the road, with nothing but the eerie glow of the moon and our headlights illuminating the way. The atmosphere in the car was light, and we laughed and joked around, excited for the adventure that lay ahead of us. Little did we know that night would turn out to be one we would never forget. As we continued down the deserted highway, the darkness seemed to grow thicker around us. The only sound was the hum of the car's engine and the occasional gust of wind rustling the trees along the roadside. It was then that we saw her. At first, it was just a small, huddled figure curled up on the side of the road. We slowed down, peering out into the night, unsure of what we were seeing. As we got closer, we realized it was a little girl, seemingly asleep on the cold, hard ground. Confused and concerned, we decided to stop and check on her. As we cautiously approached the little girl, we noticed her shallow breaths and how her fragile body trembled. We exchanged nervous glances among ourselves, our minds racing with unanswered questions. Was she lost? Had she been abandoned? It seemed impossible that she could have ended up in this desolate place by herself. We wrapped her in one of the blankets we had brought for our trip and gently scooped her into our arms, taking care not to jostle her too much. Once we settled her in the back seat, we took a few moments to examine her more closely. Her face was smudged with dirt, and her clothes were worn and ragged. It was obvious to us that she had been through something truly horrifying, and we were determined to get her the help she needed. We put on some soft music, hoping it would bring her some comfort, and continued driving toward the nearest hospital. During the drive, we glimpsed at her every so often, anxiously watching for any signs of movement or distress. Each time we looked back, we felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation, wondering what had led her to that lonely stretch of road. We whispered amongst ourselves, discussing the possible scenarios and trying to make sense of the situation, but nothing seemed to fit. We felt an inexplicable sense of dread creeping in, despite our attempts to rationalize our fears. As the girl began to stir, our attention snapped back to her. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a piercing, almost unnatural gaze that seemed to see right through us. She began to speak, but it was not the voice of a child that came from her lips. It was deep and gravelly, the voice of an adult, and it sent a cold chill down the back of our spines. As she spoke, she began to chant in a language we didn't understand, the words echoing through the car like a sinister lullaby. As we started to drive toward the nearest hospital, panic began to set in, our hearts racing in our chests as we tried to process what was happening. We didn't know what to do, how to react to this bizarre and terrifying turn of events. As the chanting grew louder and more intense, the car suddenly stopped, as if the engine had been ripped from its core. We were stranded in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, with something unimaginable in the backseat. Before we could gather our wits and decide on our next move, the girl sprang from the car, her movements swift and unnatural. She vanished into the thick forest that lined the road, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. We were left in the car, paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what had just happened. It took us a while to snap out of our stupor and gather the courage to step out of the car. We searched the area, calling out for the girl, but there was no response. It was as if she had never been there at all, swallowed up by the darkness that surrounded us. Eventually, we managed to get the car started again, and we sped away from that place, desperate to put as much distance between us and the nightmare we had just experienced. As we drove back home, we all felt that we had been part of something beyond our understanding, something that defied logic and reason. We were haunted by the memory of the girl's chilling voice and the otherworldly words she had chanted. The fear and confusion that had gripped us refused to let go, and all we could do was wonder what had happened to her and what dark forces might have been at play. We called the police and let them know about what happened, and they said they'll look into it, but they seemed skeptical. I hope whoever, or whatever that was, made it out of. It was the dream vacation that we had been planning for months, a road trip through America's heartland to bond as a family and experience the country's vast landscapes. My wife, our 2 kids, and I piled into our trusty RV, filled with anticipation and excitement for the journey ahead. The open road beckoned, and we eagerly set off, unaware of the terrifying ordeal that awaited us. As we drove through picturesque countryside, winding through peculiar towns and dense forests, we marveled at the beauty and diversity of our surroundings. Our days were spent exploring national parks and historical sites, while our evenings were filled with laughter and storytelling around campfires. We were having the time of our lives, creating precious memories we knew would last a lifetime. It was about a day into our trip when I first noticed the car. It was a beat-up old sedan, nondescript in every way except for the fact that it seemed to be everywhere we went. At first, I brushed it off as a coincidence, but as the days went on and the car continued to shadow our every move, I had the pesky feeling that we were being followed. I tried not to alarm my family, but my wife soon picked up on my growing anxiety. We discussed our options, debating whether to confront the occupants of the car or report our suspicions to the authorities. Eventually, we decided that it was best to gather evidence of their persistent presence, so we began discreetly documenting their appearances with our phones. The tension in the car began to mount as we continued our journey, the once carefree atmosphere now tainted by our uninvited pursuers. We tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of our children, but the strain of the situation began to take its toll on all of us. Our once lighthearted conversations turned to hushed whispers, and the laughter that had once filled the car was now a distant memory. As the days went by, our unseen tormentors grew bolder. They began driving closer to our vehicle, their headlights glaring ominously in our rear-view mirror. It was then that we realized we could no longer avoid a confrontation. We knew we had to act, and we had to act quickly. We chose a relatively busy rest stop to confront our stalkers, hoping that the presence of other people would deter any potential aggression. We pulled over and waited, our hearts pounding in our chests as a familiar sedan pulled in behind us. The moment of truth had arrived, and we steeled ourselves for what was to come. As the occupants of the sedan stepped out of their car, my heart sank. They were armed, the cold metal of their guns glinting menacingly in the sunlight. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to protect my family. In a split second, I made the decision to put the car in reverse, slamming the accelerator and swerving away from our pursuers. My wife gripped the door handle, her knuckles white, while our children huddled together in the back seat, their wide eyes filled with terror. We sped away, the adrenaline coursing through our veins as we put as much distance as possible between us and the gunmen. As soon as we were safely out of their sight, we called the police, our voices shaking as we relayed the horrifying details of our encounter. The authorities assured us that they would do everything in their power to apprehend the suspects and advised us to find somewhere safe to stay while they investigated the matter. We followed their advice, seeking refuge in a small motel in a nearby town. The once joyful spirit of our road trip had been replaced by a heavy cloud of fear and uncertainty. We spent our days huddled together in our room, jumping at every sound and constantly looking over our shoulders, worried that our pursuers might somehow find us again. Our once adventurous spirits were now consumed by anxiety, and we felt a sense of loss for the carefree days we had left behind. Meanwhile, the police were hard at work, using the evidence we had provided to track down the gunmen. They'd assured us that they were making progress, but every day that passed without an arrest felt like an eternity. We tried to distract ourselves by watching movies and playing board games, anything to keep our minds off the terrifying situation we had found ourselves in. After what felt like an endless wait, the police finally contacted us with the news we had been praying for. They had apprehended the suspects. The relief that we had was inexpressible. We learned that the men had been involved in a series of criminal activities and had targeted us because they believed we had witnessed one of their crimes. Our documentation of their persistent presence had been instrumental in their capture. With the threat finally neutralized, we were free to resume our road trip, but the experience had left a lasting impact on us. The remainder of our journey was colored by an undercurrent of discomfort, as it strongly felt that we had lost our innocence in some way. We still marveled at the beauty of the landscapes we traversed and enjoyed exploring new destinations, but the unbridled joy we had felt at the beginning of our trip had been replaced by a more cautious appreciation. My wife and I had been looking forward to our honeymoon road trip for weeks, excited to embark on a romantic adventure through the country's breathtaking landscapes. Our wedding had been an unforgettable celebration of our love, and now we were eager to spend some quality time together, exploring new places and creating lasting memories as a newly married couple. We had meticulously planned our route, choosing destinations that offered a mix of natural beauty and historical charm. We reveled in the freedom of the open road, cherishing the time we spent driving through the picturesque countryside, our conversations filled with laughter and dreams for our future together. As we ventured further from home, we found ourselves drawn to the more remote and lesser-known destinations, intrigued by the mystery and allure of the untrodden paths. It was in one such location, a small village nestled deep in the woods, that our idyllic honeymoon took a dark and unexpected turn. We arrived in the village late in the afternoon, the sun casting a warm, golden glow over the lovely, ivy-covered cottages that lined the narrow streets. The village seemed frozen in time, untouched by the chaos and noise of the modern world. We were captivated by its charm and decided to spend the night at a cozy bed and breakfast, eager to explore the village and its surroundings further the following day. That evening, we took a leisurely stroll through the village, basking in the peaceful atmosphere and admiring the intricate centuries-old architecture. As we walked down a path, we had this strange feeling that every move was being watched, our every move observed by unseen eyes. It was a subtle, unnerving sensation that seemed to grow stronger as the day faded into night. We brushed off the worry, chalking it up to our overactive imaginations and the unfamiliarity of our surroundings. We spent the rest of the evening enjoying a candlelit dinner at a local inn, the warmth of the food and the company of each other temporarily driving away the lingering sense of disquiet. The following morning, we set off on a hike through the dense woods that surrounded the village, eager to explore the rugged beauty of the landscape. The further we ventured into the forest, the more we began to notice odd occurrences that we couldn't quite explain. The air grew unnaturally still, and the sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if stifled by an unseen force. As we continued deeper into the woods, we came across a small clearing, and in its center stood a solitary, gnarled tree, its twisted branches reaching out like twisted claws. The atmosphere in the clearing was heavy, charged with a sense of ominous that freaked us out. It felt as if we had stumbled upon something ancient and dark, a place where the veil between the natural and the supernatural had worn thin. We decided to turn back, the eerie silence and oppressive energy of the forest becoming too much to bear. As we retraced our steps, we knew deep down that we were no longer alone, that something was following us just beyond the edge of our vision. We quickened our pace, our hearts pounding in our chests as the forest seemed to close in around us. When we finally emerged from the woods, we were relieved to find ourselves back in the village, the oppressive atmosphere of the forest replaced by the familiar sounds and sights of civilization. We sought refuge in the bed and breakfast, grateful for the safety and comfort of its walls, but the unsettling events of the day continued to haunt us. As night fell, we lay in our room, the darkness outside pressing against the windows like a living, malevolent force. We huddled together, listening to the faint, unexplained noises that seemed to echo through the house, our minds racing with the horrors that our imaginations conjured. Sleep seemed impossible as every creak and groan of the old building set our nerves on edge. The following morning, we decided to leave the village, our honeymoon marred by the chilling experiences we had endured. We had a distressing sense that something sinister lurked in the shadows of the pretty village and its foreboding forest, and we were desperate to put as much distance as possible between us and the malevolent presence we had encountered. As we drove away, we couldn't help ourselves but glance back at the village one last time, a quiver down our spines as we recalled the unnerving events that had transpired. We tried to put the experience behind us, focusing instead on the beauty of the open road and the excitement of our continuing adventure. As the miles stretched out before us, we gradually began to regain our sense of wonder and joy, our spirits lifting as we immersed ourselves in the stunning landscapes and charming towns we encountered. Our conversations returned to laughter and light-hearted banter, the eerie memories of the village fading into the background. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.